Alrighty, hello again, vinyl community and other music junkie. Uncle Roddus again, back again with another weekly video actually at the moment, because I've got quite a lot of stuff coming in. Still New Zealand Music Month, of course, being still in May, and nearly all of my purchases this week have been New Zealand Music records, all via the mail. Haven't been back to the record shop this week, haven't had a chance to do that, and frankly haven't got a lot of funds left after making all these other purchases, so we'll hook into it. I think I might have mentioned in the last video that being part of New Zealand Music Month, I had been perusing back through some videos from Chris Walker, who is a local collector of New Zealand music and has a radio show up in the North Island, which he then Radio Waiheke, which is then broadcast on the internet, and also he posts that podcast later on. And his last show, not the one, he just had one last night which had some of the stuff on it that I'm going to show, but also the month before had some of the stuff that turned me on, as well as going back through his back catalogue of videos. So he's put me onto a lot of pretty obscure but really good New Zealand music that I probably wouldn't know otherwise. This stuff is pretty low-key releases. It's not stuff that gets a lot of promotion and a lot of information about it, although if you know the names, you can do some searching on the line and find out a bit more about it. So on his last show he mentioned this album by a new fella that I'd never heard of course, who has released this new album out, and his name is Tom Cunliffe, and Chris was extremely excited about this record, and it said it had pretty much shot straight to the top of his list for new releases for the year. And this is the album here. It's called Howl and Whisper, Tom Cunliffe. Interesting cover, as you can see, and it's released on Littleton Records. Now Littleton Records is a little wee bouquet label over in Littleton Harbour, which is over the Port Hills from Christchurch. Those of us who used to live in Christchurch, and still do live in, and those who still live in Christchurch, access Littleton via the Littleton Road Tunnel, which drives under the hill, fortunately, which wasn't damaged in the earthquake. But this here is living up to what Chris, the hype from Chris, and I am really impressed with it. It is singer-songwriter, alt country, well, Americana is a pretty good description just to describe it, and it's very good. He's got a wonderful voice, lovely guitaring, lovely songwriting, really good album. Another one that Chris Walker has put me onto, now this one he flashed on Facebook a couple of weeks back, and often when he does, if something tickles my fancy, I will go and have a look or a listen, and I managed to find it maybe on Tidal or something. Anyway, I had a quick listen to it, and I was suitably impressed with what I heard, and ordered this copy from Flying Out. So the name of the band is A Dead Forest Index, and the name of the album is In All That Drifts From Summit Down. There's a pretty black and white sort of photo on the front. So there's two fellas, Adam Sherry and Sham Sherry, so they're brothers, all words and music perform yet. So they play in all the instruments, and they have a wonderful vocal harmony together, these guys. It's very impressive. I mean, they're men, but they do sound like, yeah, as Chris said when he first heard it, he wasn't sure if it was a female vocal, so they are kind of like that. I think there's a guy called Anthony Hegemony or something, who used to be in Anthony and the Johnsons, and I've heard a little bit of his music, and he would be not quite the same, but he would come to mind as far as this is concerned. But this is very stark and minimal, quite, but it's beautiful pop music, and it's a hugely powerful record. I just, first listen was just like, I've got to buy this, and I've played it twice since I've had it. It's only had it a couple of days, and just, yeah, phenomenal record. Absolutely blown me away. And New Zealand artist too, so that's just so cool. Chris's last video that he showed, and he did play some of this on his show last night. I don't have much New Zealand jazz music, and I do love my jazz music, especially contemporary jazz, 21st century jazz, or even late 90s. I do like it a lot. And yeah, New Zealand has a jazz scene, and doing some research I've discovered, and from some of the information that's coming to me, I've discovered a fair bit more of it. I haven't had a chance to listen to a lot of it, but it's very, very low key. But saying that, there are some jazz musicians around who I didn't know about, like Mike Knock, for instance, who I've talked about recently, and who've been around for a long time and have put out some amazing music, and just really have, unless you're really in the know, they've really pretty much travelled under the radar. So Chris showed this on his video, and I knew that as soon as I heard the explanation about it, and that I needed to get it. So this is the way. No, the way in is the way out. The music of Murray McNabb. Murray McNabb is a keyboardist. Unfortunately, he has passed away in the last couple of years, I think. This is pretty much a double album of retrospective, covering quite a lot of his career. It's called the Archive Series Volume 2, and it's released on Sarabang Records. Bloody expensive, unfortunately, and by the time I paid for the cost of the postage, I spent nearly $70 for this double LP. A limited edition, gatefold, with some liner notes which I haven't actually got around to reading yet. Very well packaged, heavy duty cardboard, 180 gram vinyl, a bit of a poster there. And this thing that came around the outside of the album talks about some of the other albums on the record label. Yeah, so that was cool. And Murray McNabb was in quite a lot of music called groups around New Zealand. Things, one called Space Chase, Hard Jazz, Murray McNabb Septet, Modern Times, and the Dr. Tree were bands that he were in around New Zealand from the 1970s and late 60s, 70s. Yeah, 70s and 80s more than those, but I think he was around a bit longer earlier than that. And then that's the first two sides, and the next sides are pretty much, I haven't actually got right through listening to them yet. I had listened to side 3 last night. That's a bit more esoteric and weird, and yeah, it's still jazzy, but not as jazzy. Some of the other jazzy stuff's quite funky too, so it's like jazz fusion. But no, I'm just blown away. Great record, another great New Zealand jazz player who I'd never heard of, and there's actually another album on this label of his stuff, so I might look into that too. So that's pretty impressive. My first album by this man, Delaney Davidson. This is a self-released album, so there's just no record label as such on the record. It's just got this white label with the songs on it. It's just a simple fold and half sleeve like so, with a made up kind of bunch of notes on the back, written like a serious article with all sorts of notes, but I haven't read that all of it yet. But how cool it is. This is a live, I think it's a live record. This is something that Chris had played on one of his record shows, radio shows. Although I had a new of Delaney Davidson. I haven't had any of his records before. He played on Tammy Nielsen's last record, and that was really, really impressive that he did stuff he did with that. The next one is a band I was a lot more familiar with, and although I hadn't listened to anything that they'd done in the last couple of years, Minway, they're kind of an electronic-y pop sort of band, and they had a couple of albums that were quite big in New Zealand back in the mid-2000s, and I had both of those on CD, their first two albums. They've since released a couple of more records in between times, and then this is their last release from 2012. This is a double album, 45 RPM, so there's 3 songs on each side, and yeah, I like it. It's good. They certainly have still got what it takes. Now this was bought, this is self-released and was bought off their Bandcamp site, so it still actually cost me a little bit of money. According to their site, there are two versions of this. There's a New Zealand version for New Zealand people, and then there's an overseas version. I'm not sure what the difference is, but there was only 50 copies of this available for New Zealand. Interestingly enough, with it, and it was totally a surprise to me, came a whole bunch, well, 3 of these 12-inch EPs. A room full of cute. It's basically a room full of cute, which was off their second album, and there's sort of like remixes, and yeah, a couple of remixes on that. So I got 3 of those. Fuji again off their second album, and this one here is Accept You, which was off their first album. So these are remixes. I actually haven't listened. I listened to one of them. I'm not a big remix person, to be honest. So they were okay, but they were pretty cool. I mean, they were a complete surprise to me that they turned up. Weren't expecting them at all. Last week I mentioned that I bought off of another Bandcamp page Craig Williams, a musician from Hamilton, New Zealand, who has 3 bands that he's been involved with, of varying versions of psych rock, you know, instrumental, some of it's occasional vocals. And there was Arc of Ascent and Datura, the 2 albums I showed last week. The Arc of Ascent was his latest album. The Datura one was an earlier album from 2009. He also has a band, and I think this is his most prolific band, Lamp of the Universe, and I think this was their last album, Collostridium Records, 2014, 2012. I'm not sure, it hasn't got a date on it. Interesting. I know this was a fairly recent one. I've only listened to this once so far, and I do seem to remember there was a fair bit of sitar sort of sounding music on it. Hello, Ruby. Hello. So yeah, it's a bit lighter than the other 2 albums. Not as guitar blowing, and a little bit more atmospheric. So he's got, yeah, those 3 bands where he works in different styles of music. Cool covers, of course, and you know, fold out. Don't think this was on any sort of coloured vinyl. No, just plain black vinyl for that one. They've got quite a lot of records, not all of them available on vinyl. Fish Rider Records was something I've talked about a couple of times, and I've picked up a few of their records. And this was one by a band called The Puddle, who I think have been around a wee while. This is from 2012 as well, I think. This is a reissue of 2 EPs combined together to make this album. Yeah, The Secret Holiday and Victory Blues, and Chris had showed this on his video, and a couple of people have mentioned that they quite like The Puddle. So they had a few releases on Fish Rider, not as easy to get on vinyl, but yeah, worthwhile. Kind of, you know, experimental-ish pop. I really haven't had a decent listen to it yet. And the last 2, again, bought off their Bandcamp sites, and again seen on a video, one of Chris's earlier videos. This is from 2009. In addition, 214 of 300. So this band is a 4-piece from, is it 4-piece? No, 3-piece from Dunedin. Left or Right is the name of the band. Nuggety is the name of the album. And like I say, self-release, yeah, 300 copies. This one is on Nuggety brown vinyl, and as you can see, it's got their own label on it. And now this is a good album. This is really cool. This is the one that Chris had on his video, and I also picked up another one which I'll show in a second. This is, it's an interesting juxtaposition of music. It's reggae tinged, grungy, experimentally type pop. So it's got a lot happening on it, to be honest. This one here, the tracks are quite long, so there's 2 tracks on side A. It's 7, nearly 8 minutes and 9.5 minutes, and then there's another 8-minute track on side B, and then a couple of shorter tracks. So they kind of stretch out and experiment around a fair bit, and it's a quite good atmospheric, some good guitaring, and then it's got this reggae, kind of like light reggae tinge underneath it, underpinning it all. And it's the same for this, their latest album. This is number 47 of 400. Gatefold, this one. This was from 2015. They call the releases My Yoda Productions, which is quite cool. This is just on a black vinyl, but you can see it's got their own label. Again, this is called Trippy. The album's called Trippy. These songs are a lot shorter. There's 8 songs all up. Yeah, a bit shorter. The styling is the same, but it doesn't quite stretch out as much. There's not quite as much atmospherics on it. It's a bit more straightforward, poppy, commercial. Not commercial, to be honest, really, is it? Yeah, still a good album, and I've listened to this once, and I've got the sense that I liked it, that I'm going to enjoy it. It's going to grow on me. But the first album is definitely the better of the two. And there's some pretty cool effects on there, some pretty cool sound effects fleshing out the songs that I really liked, even on the second album especially, for the short sort of pop songs. But it's certainly an interesting combination of musical styles, with that light reggae sort of underpinning it, and then some of the grungy sort of guitaring coming in short bursts. Shorter bursts on the second album, but longer sustained bursts on the first album. And then, unfortunately, this one here, which is playing in the background, a CD, I cannot find this on vinyl because due to the fact that it was actually never released on, so Chris tells me in the end. So this is an Emerald City, the 4th. This is their second album. I couldn't even find this on Discogs, to be honest. This is the album he showed me first up was their first album, which I can't remember the name of, which I couldn't even find on CD, let alone on vinyl anymore. The vinyl had sold out. And their I can't remember where I got this off Fishpond, that's right. But their Bandcamp page is only selling digital copies. But this is, instrumental. I guess post rock seems to be a term that's been floating around and thrown around in description of this, but I really like this. This is great music. Yeah, and I do like. I mean, things like, I think Battles is a band that not exactly like this, but it's the same sort of thing. Instrumental, interesting, quite cool music. Battles, it was another one. Explosions in the Sky. I think Chris mentioned that. Anyway, so yeah, I really enjoyed this. Pity I couldn't get it on vinyl, and pity I can't find their first album either. But Emerald City, the 4th, great CD. And also another one I unfortunately haven't been able to pick up on vinyl due to the fact that it was about a limited edition of 100 copies, and it's completely sold out now. I had actually had a download. This is from Fish Rider Records. I actually had a download code that came with one of the other Fish Rider records. But this is Males. And this is an EP, to be honest. It's about 21 minutes long. The actual, it's just called Males, I think, but it doesn't actually say that. This is Males on the front and back. But this is great little psychedelic pop. Again, Fish Rider Records. Yeah, you can get this on CD. They did have some earlier stuff released as well, I think. But I really liked it. It's been on my smartphone through at work, so I could listen to it at work, and it had grown on me quite a lot. And that, but of course, by the time I got on to them, the vinyl was well and truly sold out. So anyway, and finally, and not a New Zealand music release, and one that I should have bought bloody long time ago, to be honest, but hadn't really got around to it. And the vinyl had sold out, of course, and then the second pressing came out, and then I heard people say the second pressing wasn't all that good as compared to the first one, probably because they got it rushed out due to circumstances at the time. But it's certainly been around on CD and freely available, and I was in the warehouse and I saw it on the shelf, and I thought it's about time I got my shit together and got a copy of it. And so there it is, David Bowie, his Black Star album, released 2 days before he died, as we all know. And I had heard it on Tidal a few times, but I haven't got the title system set up through the big stereo behind me. It's on some more lo-fi gear, and unfortunately it doesn't sound as good. So got this on, had a couple of listens to it the day I bought it, and spent a bit of time with it in the evening, and it is growing very fast, and it is a fantastic album. It is a really fantastic album. I've heard all the hype, and I've heard so many people say how good it is, and I'm always a bit suspicious about, especially when someone passes away, and how much praise their music might get at that time, just because of the fact that they were well famous and they passed on, and blah blah blah. But yes, this is incredibly good album. The Next Day, his previous album, was one that I had really enjoyed and thought it was probably the best thing he'd done since Scary Monsters in 1979. And I could hear bits of those earlier albums in that album. This is quite different, but it's still friggin' good. So yeah, finally got a copy of that. I mean, I could